I want to congratulate you all on such a fantastic film. It was so well received. It was so funny. It was warm. It had political, social topics it was great. So a round of applause for such a great film. And what really struck me about the film is that it's something that everyone can watch. My father would love, my sister would love, everyone would love to watch this film. And that's such a difficult thing to achieve just getting it right in comedy for everyone. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to do this film this way and who your audience were? Was that what you were hoping to do, to reach a large audience?
Well, I think always it's a hope to reach a large audience. Any artist who denies that, I think, is lying. I mean, it's funny, once you get a bit of a bigger audience, there's always a tendency. When I first, as a comedian, graduated from really horrible little clubs and pubs to bigger stages, inevitable, would you feel you've sold out at all? Well, I hope I've sold out, because we've got a big hall here. If you create a piece of work, then I think you almost inevitably want people to see it and hopefully appreciate it. But you can't aim for a large audience. My belief, any advice I could ever give to any writer, and probably same goes for acting, is that it's with Polonius, quote from Hamlet, above all to thine own self be true. I think if you please yourself, then you've got an opportunity to perhaps please others. If you set out to please others, then you're probably going to miss both marks, yourself and the others. And then if you do fail, at least you can say to yourself, well, I was honest. I did a piece of work that I believed in, and if it didn't find an audience, well, I can't, I'm not to blame, because I expressed myself to the best of my abilities. So no, I didn't set out to reach a big audience, but I hope that what I did will reach a big audience. And I didn't set out, people have been kind enough to say that the film, embraces inclusivity in a very positive and entertaining way. It has, perhaps, I think the word message is dreadfully off-putting to any audience, but if it has something to say about community, and I love that. I'm so delighted that that's one of the principal things that people took away, having said they loved it and they laughed at it. But if I'd set out to make a film that made people perhaps feel positive about the idea of community, I think I would have failed.
Yeah.
You just have to put your love and your heart into your work and hope that the love and the heart comes out the other end. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and that's what felt last night. It really felt like the community in that audience, which is so great to see it on a big screen in the cinema, is because you get that big community feeling that you wouldn't get sitting at home. It's such a beautiful thing to be part of. And another interesting thing about this film was the structure. You've got a multi-layered comment, lots of different people's stories. Did you set out to do that from the start?
Yeah, the idea was always all about storytelling. Yeah. I mean, because you've got this one setting, for those who haven't seen it, 3 summers, and it takes place on the same 2 days each summer for 3 years, a festival. And it's a festival, it's based on a quirky, kooky, great fun little family folk festival, camping, holiday thing in WA that I and my family go to. I remember thinking, I'll drop a clunking great name here, but I was sat in the bar. I used to say, when the kids were young, I always used to say, look, we'll have a base. I'll be here with the bags and the phones and everything. You go, I'll be here in the bar. This is the base. I'll just be in the bar, and you can absolutely be sure that I'll be here in the bar, so I'm the safe base, the safe place. And I used to sit in the bar. And one year, Emma Thompson was staying with her family, and they're big music people as well. And so we all went as the 2 families to this holiday. It caused a stir in the queue for the Portaloos, I can tell you. It was a double Oscar winner with a sponge bag and towel over her arm in a queue. And I remember sat there talking to her about, wouldn't it be great? There must be 1,000 stories here. All these different people, different classes, different incomes, different cultures, and we've all come because everyone likes music. So, you don't have to share politics or share beliefs or share sexual orientation. People like politics, so people like music. So that will bring us all together, this funny little place. And I thought, what a great place to tell a whole bunch of Australian stories, because my Australian story is an interesting one, and it's made me want to tell some other ones. And so, yeah, the whole idea was it should be a collage. Queenie, the character that Magda plays, Australia in a tent, and a collage of interconnecting stories. And sometimes those little interconnections will change each other's directions. I mean, my direction in life was changed fundamentally by getting off a plane, meeting my support act, and ending up, marrying the bass player. So, people connections, things that
support act.
I support artists. It's and I wanted to tell stories that connected with each story and perhaps influenced them. So obviously the principal one about the two refugee stories, effectively, the young boy who's just arrived, and then there's this character that Michael Caton plays, an older, who's also came as a young boy, almost sort of captured one of the forgotten generations, they call them, these pommy kids who were supposed to stock Australia with white stock back in the 50s. And those two stories interconnect. So yeah, it was always about storytelling, multi-storytelling.
Okay. And Robert and Rebecca are the romantic leads and comedy leads in this show. I think what we'll do is start by, I should show you a clip, the trailer, the teaser to the film.
I thought we were going to act out one of the scenes, no?
Yeah, actually, that would be great. So we'll show that so that for those of you who haven't seen it can get a flavour of what Three Summers is about, and then we'll talk further about your characters. At the centre of all these stories is we've got Rebecca and Robert. Tell us a bit about why you decided to do this film. You were asked, obviously, and it's a great film. So what made you both want to do this film?
Well, I read the character, and immediately there was this feeling of a full-bodied character, and not often I don't want to be a broken record, but not always do women get to play the full-bodied 3D character. There's a lot of, you're 2D or you're assisting another character, and this girl, and also you're either functioning as the bitch or the pretty one or this or that. And this girl, sometimes she was bitchy, sometimes she was darling and lovable, sometimes she was hilarious, sometimes she was heartbroken. She was very full-bodied. She was a fully rounded character, and I think getting able, something that really responded to me was using humour as a mechanism to navigate what she was going through, her pain, and also the, fighting and love, And I think that's a really human thing, and I certainly do that, and so it felt very natural doing these lines and being in this character, because I'm like, yeah, I can diffuse things with a bit of humour, skip over so that was a big part of it.
And I can honestly say that from the first, these days with the net and everything, you often audition by internet and tape and everything, and Rebecca recorded a piece in New York, actually with her husband Luke, doing a very fine Irish accent. In the background, I could hear him. That was my first introduction to Luke. And it was immediate. Michael and Sue will back me up in saying we immediately said, that's our Kiwi, So the fact that you'd embraced it in your heart came all the way through the internet with a little help. And it was, she was fully rounded. My goodness, that's our Kiwi. And I remember the moment of no further need we look.
That's fantastic. And can I also compliment you, Ben, on these? The female characters in this movie are fantastic. Many of them very strong, really well rounded. It was that's one of the things that I really took away from it. I was like, it's so rare to see. It really is.
Yeah,
so
having an arc, a full story, and and not just being one thing. She's a musician, and you got to be a human, an actual fully rounded human. That was the deal for me. It was
a lot of very funny
For me,
women
it was,
too.
I knew that I would look really sexy because I got to play the theremin. I was like, because we all know now that the theremin is taking over the guitar as the sexiest instrument of all.
After Magda played it with her tongue last night at the party.
You're lying if you say you did not get turned on by that.
And for those of you who just don't know what a theremin is, when Magda played it with it, that just means air licking. The funny thing about the theremin is, air guitar, with the theremin, you play air, theremin, and that's it. That's actually what it is. The theremin is an air instrument.
The way you play it, Ben.
Seeing you
Magda
lick
made it
the
a
air
contact instrument somehow.
very special.
So, Robert, for you, what attracted you to the film?
First and foremost, just made me laugh a lot, which is hard when you read a script, for a script to make you laugh, because a script is quite an aggressive format. It can be quite sort of blunt and to the point, exterior, house, day. So you have to
felt a little excited at that. I want to know what happens next.
Man emerges in the nude. But so you have to bridge the gap descriptively, emotionally, a lot. You know, you have to sort of do a lot of emotional gymnastics. So, you know, but this script was really, really, really easy and funny to read. And as soon as I was 10 or 15 pages into the character, I was sort of up and kind of stumbling around my bedroom and pacing and immediately having the instinct to perform it as opposed to just read it as a kind of okay, let's read it as a sort of an observational gaze here and see and then kind of think about it and do a kind of a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The opposite of practical. Ben?
Impractical?
Yes. Exercise. And he's very verbose. You can always rely on him to give you a word or two. And then we had I actually popped Ben's Skype cherry, which I'm quite proud of.
Yes, very much, very much.
And it was one of those very.
And after that, we did the audition. Very special thing. There's a sort of video casting couch. No, what he means is we did an audition via Skype, which is an astonishing thing for me. I'm very, I'm not very up to speed. I have a smartphone, but I basically use it for conversations. And my kids are all saying, you could do so much more. But we did, obviously Rob was in Britain, and so we were able to talk and even read together.
Yeah.
Literally across the world, which to me, and I bet quite a few people in the audience, because, remains miraculous beyond imagination. That we're there.
As long as the internet's working.
Yes,
Yeah.
What we did, what was tough at times was when there was a delay, and, I would be doing my deep and meaningfuls or trying to be funny, and, funny is all about timing. And then you just see a blank look on Ben Elton's face for 3 or 4 seconds. You think, oh God.
Yes, comedy on a bad internet connection is and even a good internet connection, because timing is split second, it's a picosecond. The difference, I always say when talking about comic timing with actors, my wife's a bass player, and there's a phrase in bass playing called, she's in the pocket, he's in the pocket. And that means you can have 2 bass players and they really do sound the same. It's following the note, very proficient, they really got the whole slap going on, but one's in the pocket and one isn't. There isn't any time to describe it. It's picoseconds, but the difference between being in the pocket with comedy and not is the same. I think with great music, somehow you just know something is going right. And
so, despite the fact that we had to hang up and call each other back a few times, we had a really lovely chat and sort of got on, and I talked a bit about what I felt about the character, and so did he, and that was kind of.
And you told me you'd played the theremin before. I don't. I won't say under what influence, but
mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Said I have actually played the theremin band, but I was out of my head on rooms at the time, so I.
Great. I mean, you can imagine that experience, your first theremin experience while on psychedelics.
It's got to be the way, hasn't it?
I would recommend it.
I was with Rob. There was as I say, with Rebecca, that's it. We're there, and I had a problem with Rob's audition. It was so funny, it was so brilliant. Even at the time, the character was a pom. The idea was he's sort of this bit like me, sort of a little bit chippy pom, never quite allowed to. I always say if you're a pom in Oz, they never really let you in. It's the one ethnic group that people can still shit on without being accused of being, politically incorrect.
Actually, there was that speech, wasn't there, before he became Irish? Yeah, there was those very words were in the script.
I still go to barbecues and get blamed for Gallipoli. There's something about being English. But Rob auditioned as a pom with a brilliant, gave me posh, gave me Cockney. He fantastic actor. I mean, I was very happy with his English characters. The problem was, actually, I said, mate, you're just too good looking. It's obviously a romantic lead, and this is a kind of geeky, techie sort of, not an obvious pick for lovely Kiwi. She's not going to be instantly smitten. It's his hands. In the script, it was all about, she sees his sensitive hands moving in the air and everything. And I said, she won't be looking at your hands. Look at the man. Jesus Christ. He's eye candy. And I said, and he said, no, I can play ugly, Ben. I can be
I'll scar myself.
And of course, I thought, what am I fighting here? He's a great actor. Of course, he'll play a irritating geek. That's the character. That's what acting's about. But of course, I also want to, you know, I want the right guy for the role, and hell, I'll take the good-looking one. And so that was a problem, because I hadn't thought originally in terms of quite such a visual fit. Kiwi, you know, the sort of Irish, Australian, and all that. But as I say, Rob's comic timing, his ability to inhabit a character, you know, the pommy thing, which was so impressive. And then when we started really talking, and this beautiful voice and such a melodic thing going on, and why would I fight that? In a way, making him a pom is almost, it's too easy a way to be irritating. You know, I want this to be genuinely a bloke who's up his own self and can't get out of his own way. And if he has that Irish charm and yet still he can't fight it, he can't, I thought it'll work even better. And it really was we developed this together.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that you have that they're quite unlikable at the start. They are quite unlikable. You're like, oh, you too, oh, and you make them lovable, and that is quite a mean feat.
It's
really.
more the character of Roland. I mean, again, I mean, maybe it's because I'm a guy. I think Cleaves is nice from the start. She has you know, she's no pushover, and she's, you know, kind of, you know, gives her dad heaps and all that. And but yeah, the character of Roland was supposed to be. I know a lot of musos, and a lot of them are purists, and they're zealots. I mean, particularly jazz musos, and I thought it would be really funny to have this guy who just won't give in on his musical puritanism, because I've met a lot of people like that, because my wife's a bass player. I've been around musos all my life.
Yeah.
And I think there's a line that sort of sums up where Roland is at the beginning of the film, which is where Kiwi says, and you know, she was like, you know, do you ever think about what's the line about disappearing up my own arse?
Yeah,
but I'm very much
How do
up.
you stop yourself from disappearing up your arse?
Yeah. And it's like he's very, very much up his own arse at the top of the film, and she, I think, gently coaxes him out.
Yeah, he says, and it's not
lovely
easy, because
visual.
he says he likes it there. You know, he likes. A lot of people are up their own arses who do like their own arsehole company. You know, and they need bringing out, and there's no doubt about it that the zealotry. But they're both zealots in a way. She's a folk zealot, and you know, she's stuck in her groove. Both of them. I think there's an element of Groundhog Day in the storytelling, in that because everyone's meeting it once a year, you know, for these 2 days. Some people they finally have to recognise that they're not changing, you know, and that's what happens to Kiwi's character, that she realises that she's actually, she's in her own way in a certain way.
And I just learnt something about, which I wanted to ask you anyway, about the instrument playing. Yours was obviously easy because you just had to wave your hands here and an area.
Never say that to an actor. Oh, darling, it's not easy.
Very hard sculpting
that.
But you had to, dance Irish jig essentially and play violin. Tell us about this experience.
Yes, I had to attempt to do those things. It was just we thought it would be a really fun thing to add the jigging.
Yeah.
And obviously the violin, I had to, you know, make that believable. So I just, 2 months before, as soon as it was a green light, I just went and bought my own little fiddle.
Yeah.
Went to classes and learned the stance. It was very, I played guitar, so this thing was fine, but like popping it up here and the neck rest, and it was all very awkward. And then having to like fiddle-tee while I was doing it in the house was just, first of all, it's absolutely exhausting. I have so much respect for Irish dancers after that. You're like jumping around and your knees going that way. And you're like,
I can teach you a bit about
by all means, Magda, I would love to see this right now.
Becky knows.
She does.
And your partner Luke was saying how terrible it sounded, the playing.
Well, yeah, thankfully he wasn't there very much. My poor little dog, who obviously hears high frequencies, would just be like cowering in the corner of our tiny Brooklyn apartment, just like, why do you hate me?
But it is
Stop
it's
doing
a
this.
magnificent performance. But the fiddle playing is very complex, and
It is.
I have had so many people, including musicians, who have said, "Come on, was she playing that?"
Yeah.
It's really extraordinary. I mean, and again, I have to say, the theremin thing, you've got to. There's a tune on
an
one
art to
side,
it.
and very much so.
Yeah.
But obviously, more opportunity for comic expression.
Yes.
But with the violin, particularly, your violin teacher said, you know, it's
good.
all about the looseness in the bow arm. And as I say, the miming of the music, and it is mimed, of course. I mean, that's really complicated fiddle playing.
Very complicated.
But very, very impressive, and a great testimony to your dedication as an actor, because that took some work. And then you add the diddly diddly dancing,
And
you
then
know.
Because
the
it is
eyes.
very
and
complex.
yeah, it
It's
was
impressive.
I think the thing that helped was I just listened to the songs literally over and over and over again. So I knew every little note, and because I played music before, I know how to match. You know, this movement would be going with that note, and that is the rhythm of that. So I just practiced that over and over again. And I really want to get you guys to release the edit. I was just talking to Sue about it. We need like a what you guys are hearing and then what was actually going on the day. There's this beautiful scene where I'm playing this tune for Rob. It's like, you know that song you played, and I show you, and it's like, I didn't forget it. So I'm playing this thing. And on the day, Rob's sitting there like falling in love with me and just like, it's the best acting I saw him do the entire film because it sounded like a witch just slowly dying, you know, and I felt terrible to the crew. I was
nails
like
on a chalkboard a little bit.
It was awful.
Screen, it looks like you're doing exactly
It
that.
does,
It's
and
amazing.
thank God. But on the day, I was like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It was
to the
hard,
crew.
having to overcome that. As a director, I'd say, come on,
Yes.
you know, Bex, like, you know, you've got to stop worrying about the
I
noise.
was. I really worried
But
about
Rob
it.
also, and there's a moment, we played it at the rap party, Sue Taylor, our brilliant producer with Michael Wren, put together a fun reel, and we had the scene, but with the actual sound as opposed to the superimposed sound. And at the end of it, Rob just, that was amazing. And it's the funniest thing you can imagine, because as you say, it does sound like a witch with her fingernails out. So good testimony to both of you as top acting. Comic acting is the toughest acting, that's my view anyway.
Completely. And that's my last question for you two before I call on our next a bunch of actors up to the stage. Is now, for comedy, was this the first time for you doing straight comedy, or had you done comedy before?
Here's the thing. I hadn't done a straight comedy before, but I was itching for it, so I would always try, much to the annoyance of the other directors I work with.
Yeah.
You know, I'd always be like tripping over when I shouldn't be tripping over, or throwing an apple in a scene and dropping it. I was always trying to do something, and I hadn't had been
Other actors must
facilitating.
love you. Do you mind not juggling during my monologue, Rebecca?
Right in here.
Floppy actor.
Exactly.
And Robert, for you, I heard in Misfits that you've got a very it was a very comic character, actually. That
Very comic.
Yeah.
Very comic. Yeah.
So it's a
yeah.
drama, essentially. It would be commissioned by Drama Misfits, would you call it?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends how you how you look at it.
Yeah.
It was seen as a drama. We actually won BAFTA for best drama
Yeah,
for Misfits. But I was my contribution to the drama was little. I was very much the sort of comedic harlequin clown that was kind of framed within a drama, you know. But I did have my little. There's sort of peeks through cracks of the comedic armor a few times in Misfits, and saw sort of a vulnerability under that character. So, and we were always coaxed back from comedy with that show, you know.
Yes.
And that taught me a lot about comedy, and I think because. Again, I suppose it's the way Ben said, if you set out to please everyone, you're not going to please anyone, least of all yourself. And I think if you try to play comedy, you know, if you try to play the gags and be really funny, you'll be deeply unfunny because everyone will see what you're doing. So you have to trust that what you're saying is funny and mean it, you know.
So this must have been great, this experience to actually be, wow, great, I can just be in a comedy film completely.
Yeah,
No one
yeah.
will pull me back.
Exactly.
So having a personality, I think there was freedom to say something in a funny voice or pull a face or just be a normal human with a personality, not like I'm playing this part and I can't there's no room for that a lot of the time because you're trying to get to this part of the story and serve a function, but here we were able to be two humans playing together and that was really fun.
Comedy is about truth, no matter how big the playing. If you look at, say, Mike Myers as Austin Powers, of course it's a vast, huge performance, but he plays it with absolute integrity. He never, ever lets on that he knows it's a funny character. And so you can play at any scale in comedy, but you have to be absolutely honest. You have to inhabit the character. And we're playing some naturalistic comedy in this piece, and that's, something like the young ones of the Blackadder, a much bigger style. This is a more naturalistic style. But in a way, this is the more difficult one, which is to play absolute truth, but with a certain heightened comic character. So Rob's character is a bit more irritating than people would normally be. He pedantically picks her up on her Irishness and things like that. But it's got to be done honestly. If it becomes a comic routine, it's absolutely dead in the water.
And I think, a lot of his funniness comes from the fact that he's quite a serious guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's serious about what,
and has to show irritation and frustration, but show those things truthfully and not comedically. That he's frustrated by the fact that people call themselves Irish, even though they haven't ever been to Ireland. They don't even know their great-grandparent that was born there. Like, he has to show that frustration honestly, because people are honest and they can see honesty on the screen.
It's always about truth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, let's thank Robert and Rebecca. Ben's going to stay on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And
cheers, Natalie.
Thank you. Welcome to the stage Magda Spenski, Kelton Pell, and Michael Caton.
I've warmed that for you. I've warmed your seat, Magda. You know that it's in her contract. The director has to warm any seat she sits on. So.
I can't tell you how excited I am at that prospect of a previously asshole warmed seat.
So
Too graphic.
So your character is the host of a radio show. That radio show that I assume it goes all the time. It is only for the Westival. I was curious about that, and it's a small question. But is it?
No, I'm sure she'd be doing all sorts of community radio.
Community radio, yeah.
And she's kind of the sort of the linchpin in a sense of her name's Queenie. She's she's got quite a hand in bossing people around at the festival, and she's one of those redoubtable women that we all sort of know that do lots of community-based work. She's one of those, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And Kelton?
Jack.
Jack.
Yeah, Jack. And I've got to say, I love what Ben has written for Jack.
Yeah.
We get a little bit narky about whitefellas writing for Aboriginal material.
Yes, yeah.
But Jack's character, I couldn't have done it, no one could have done it any better, so...
Well, that is a fantastic compliment. I was careful, I don't fully subscribe to the modern idea that all imagination is some form of cultural appropriation. I think artists have to think themselves into other characters. I have to be able to write female roles. I have to be able to write as an artist. Nonetheless, if you do step outside your own cultural and emotional history and experience, you have to do so with great humility, and you have to think very hard about it. And clearly writing the Aboriginal stories in the piece, the refugee story, I can claim some kind of, my father was a refugee, but that's not me. I'm getting close to Roland's objections about how many generations are you allowed to claim the credibility of someone else's suffering. Well, I think probably only one, if that. Yeah. But nonetheless, I took a great deal of time to talk to people in the Noongar community and things, and I'm so thrilled that you felt that about it. So,
as Lionel Shriver said, if you don't, and I didn't agree with everything she said, but otherwise you're left with nothing but memoir. But having written a memoir, you're still writing about other people.
Yes,
you can't avoid, as soon as you put pen to paper, you're not just writing your own story. You are necessarily, and you just have to take the weight of that seriously.
You take it seriously, but you have to be allowed to do it. I mean, clearly we don't want a world in which there's nothing but, privileged, entitled white people writing everybody else's stories. But that isn't the world anymore. There are many, many, many wonderful artists from all cultures working in Australia, and I don't think we really, I think as long as people are respectful and work hard, then it's okay. And I think your commendation means a great deal to me, and I would use it as an example of it's okay to imagine yourself into other people's lives as long as you work hard enough at it.
And Michael, your character?
Well, I sort of play Jack's nemesis, don't I? I mean, I'm sort of the kid who was sent over here as a young boy and probably institutionalised, brutalised a bit, and it's like he's the only one who's ever suffered, and he doesn't really appreciate other people's suffering.
Yes.
And the 3 summers sees his education in a way. Bit by bit, it filters through that the people are not dissimilar from himself.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it was an interesting film for your a lot of your story talked about these things, about understanding and about recognition, and I was curious, and understanding refugees, immigration, and I was curious about whether the panel here thinks that things are changing in Australia as far as at least being able to discuss it. I know there's a lot of conflict in the moment between governments and policy. So where do you think, it's a bit of a political question, but where do you think we're going? Are we going to get there? I suppose is a question I have for you. It's a big question. But
Magda,
because there's a lot more reflection on television now, at least with things like Redfern now, black comedy, do we feel like it can change in the right direction?
Kelton?
Well, I hope it does. Unfortunately, in Western Australia, we're a bit different over there.
Yeah.
It's, the attitudes towards our people in not only in remote communities but in the cities are quite narrow and need to be changed. People need to get along and just own up to the fact that we don't come from anywhere else. We belong to this country, and as soon as we get that through our heads and start teaching our children in the schools our true history of this country, and then otherwise, we are moving forward, but unfortunately we're still taking a step back. But what Ben has dealt with in this film, with not only with the Aboriginal story into it, but the gay and lesbian story, and with the refugee story. So they are very important messages. And Western Australia, we have these horrible holding yard. Well, it's a prison out where these refugees are kept, and it takes them so many years. One of the actors he was in the film, he was one of the refugees in the camp. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, and it makes me feel extremely sad that we are treating people like this.
Yeah.
It seems we're treating the original Australians and the newest Australians in a similar way.
And I reckon the LGBTQI Australians, I think there's always, for me this film represents not just the kind of world I want to live in, but the kind of world I do live in, because that's what all my friends are. And I think that really, probably ultimately, most of us do want to live in that world. But I've always been of the view that unless you have empathy and proper understanding of your own suffering, it's going to be very hard for you to have empathy for someone else's. If you're sort of shut off and in denial, where Michael's character is sort of trapped, you can be just feeling your own pain is not enough. Sort of understanding it and knowing it, and as the Buddhists say, treating it with friendliness. And kindness can sort of open your heart, I think. And this film is a beautiful example of that, of people whose suffering actually becomes the point at which they all connect. And my hope is that eventually, through a film like this that is so good-natured, I mean, that was what drew me to it. I mean, apart from the fact that I have a mortgage, but...
well, we wouldn't have paid much of that on our budget.
No. True. Yeah, actually. I'll speak to you about it later. But... it's such a funny script. And these issues could have been too sledgehammery, but it's done with such a lightness, and it takes a potshot at extremists of all views. And there are always going to be those of us in the middle who are the majority, who just want to get along, who are prepared to listen to one another, and who want to give one another the benefit of the doubt. And we have to fight for that ground and make sure it's not stolen out from underneath us by the dogmatic extremists of any colour, persuasion, anything.
Colour,
I mean taint, not, I don't
look,
mean
I've got to get a word in here somewhere. I've got to get a word in here. Because in my mind, the film is what could be rather than what is.
Yeah.
And I refer to it as a wonderful fairy tale comedy, because that Australia could resolve the impasse we're at the moment. And I think this is sort of a job that this film could really do. And you can laugh your guts out while you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lovely thing to say, and I think it's one that perhaps all as artists should think about, because storytelling has become rather bleak. It's true to say, I certainly don't want to knock any other artist, and almost all individual stories are beautiful and well told. But there are an awful lot of guns and drugs in the stories we're telling these days. There are an awful lot of murders, and if they're not real and gritty and horrible, then they're sort of fantasy fighting where, you know, people are sort of spinning ninja kicks across the universe. And I have no argument with any of that. But I do think that we need to encourage, and it was very hard to get this film funded, and I'm very grateful for the Screen Australia and Screen West and royalties for Regions in WA. It was wonderful, but it was a long process, as it should be. The apportioning of public money is a very serious business. There's not enough of it, and a lot of artists are after it. And we got our little bit, and we made our story. But Richard Curtis, my dear friend, as you know, perhaps know, I wrote The Blackadder with, and he's done so many beautiful films, love stories. And he's often castigated critically. You know, oh, Richard Curtis, all so sugary, and where's all the, you know, and I remember him saying to me, he said, you know, I think it'd be quite easy to film, a horrible, edgy, a drug addict being shot or something, but to actually sort of get a laugh, bring a smile, little tear in the eye, it's really hard. It's not easy. It ain't easy being cheesy, they say. And although I don't think Richard's work is remotely cheesy, I think it's wonderful and life-enhancing. I put more politics into my work than he does, but his choices are that he wants to write beautiful love stories that will give people a diverting couple of hours. And yet it's almost as if that's a bad thing to do, you know, and I would make an appeal to, you know, everyone across the arts to start telling some positive stories, because people respond to them. We had laughs galore last night, and we had cheers.
It went off.
People were sort of wiping their eyes, saying, "What a lovely story!" And I was deeply moved. Apart from my youngest, who's in a school play, where my family were with me, and you know, very moving night for me. But I'm thinking people are actually quite surprised that they've seen an uplifting story.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm not, please believe me, of course I value the work of artists who tell tough and gritty stories, and they're incredibly important. But I do think it's good to celebrate the positive in life.
It's like a great 2017 version of the Priscilla and Muriel's wedding. It's got that feel, don't you? Do you
The
think?
castle.
You know how I
castle.
feel? I feel it's like Nashville.
Yeah.
A thousand stories running through it. But I think, in actual fact, Ben has resolved his a little better than Altman did.
Well, I certainly didn't allow as much blooming improvisation, let me tell you that now. You lot get in line. No, I embrace all actors' offers with great joy.
I'd like to show a clip, actually, from the film, which shows your relationship, actually, the trio of you together. And I think that clip sums up nicely. I mean, we all know someone like Michael's character. That's that, you know, whether we're related to them or not, I won't admit that.
Oh, we are them.
We are, yeah. Well, we are them, absolutely. So it is fantastic to see that character represented. Is it hard playing a character that you're not? I'm curious about this, or is it quite easy?
No, because the character's got a wonderful arc.
Yeah.
And, you know, that if I sort of accept a role, there is one role I won't accept, and that is coitus interruptus. You know, fucking without coming. And every character, that character has... It's a metaphor. Because sometimes you get off the character and the character's there, and then the character's not there, and nothing's happened to the character.
Yeah.
And but with that character, it did. It just had a lovely arc to it, where it started to sink in that that's my story. You know, he didn't get it, but that's his story, and he sees it in the refugee. And he starts to see it too in some of the Aboriginal boys, that he sees the same thing that happened to him, and people he's sort of self-involved, and his sub story too is he's recently lost his wife, and so he's struggling a bit. You know, he's bitter, and through the 3 summers, he has this arc.
So we know how to lure Michael in if I ever want to give you another role. I promise he ejaculates in the third act.
And
So
Kelton
many
Sue.
metaphors you could have taken, you know, a starter, no dessert, you know, bat, no ball, but fucking without coming. Let's go with it.
Straight to it. And Kelton, so you have that rivalry between you. And, I mean, you must know a lot of characters like Michael's playing.
Yes, I've run into a few of those. I try to ignore those.
Yeah.
Look, something I'd love to talk about though, because when I was rehearsing for the dance, and of course in our accommodation, I'm next door to Kel.
Yeah.
And so we get my boombox out and we get the whiskey and other substances and we're having a great time. And then because I had to, usually I've been on films where there's this white cast and there's a few Aborigines might be there, you know, the Noongas. But then I get dropped into the whole dancing group, and it was such an education.
Yeah.
I mean, just the camaraderie, the love, it was just a wonderful experience for me. I can't tell you. It should happen to everybody. Where you're the whitey, white fellow amongst a mob of black fellas, and got straightened up on occasion. That lovely guy who was at
TK?
Yeah, he sort of straightened me up on a couple of occasions on some of the opinions I had.
Yeah.
And it was just, should
It's
happen
a
to everybody.
beautiful, moving moment. Really, it made me cry. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
the
really,
last when he's dancing, when you do that, the dance at the end. Oh,
yeah.
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 And I mean, that's another thing about this film is there's a lot of great performers all the way through. All the way
Yeah.
through. You know, the young boys from that were dancing, the dance troupe
Yeah,
were
they're
amazing.
a dance troupe from Pinjarra, the Pinjarra Midar.
I'm going to put in a special mention for Kate Box.
Is she security?
So
She's a security guard.
funny.
Oh, yeah.
She nails it to the wall. She's wonderful.
Yeah.
90% of directing is casting, and the other 10% is having an unbelievably brilliant cinematographer like Katie Milwright, and basically
Yes.
then you can go home after that, and that was me.
Yeah, totally.
But certainly the casting, and a lot of WA actors, Diamond, who plays the over-earnest
Yes.
folk poet, and of course Sam Longley as Henry's offside of the very
How
tall-
lovely to play the
Yeah.
little guy.
Yeah,
to
finally.
Sam Longley.
Yeah. He's 6'7". No, casting is everything, and as a writer, you just you dream of casts like this, because of course, you know, 1 foot wrong and the line is totally naff. You know, there's not a line in this movie that couldn't be an awful line if it wasn't delivered with you know, pith and originality and above all honesty. And what you're hoping from an actor is always that they'll give you back more than is on the page. I use this, the best example of me is always, I use Queenie in Blackadder 2. For those of you know, when Miranda Richardson came in and played Elizabeth I in Blackadder 2. And, you know, of course I loved Ryan's character and I loved what Stephen was doing, Stephen Fry and all that. But when Richard and I were writing it, we kind of knew what they'd be giving us because we knew them so well. I mean, they were our friends, colleagues. But when Miranda came, nobody knew what she was going to do with Queenie. And
That's
it was a
freaking
completely
genius,
original, the creation. We had her slightly childlike, but nothing like the insanity that Miranda put into it. And she didn't change a single line, but they came back to us unrecognisable as lines because they were so different. The intonation appeared almost random, and yet it was perfect. And I can honestly say that the same goes for this incredible cast, that every line got handed back to me, an original line normally without a word being changed. Although Rob and Rebecca did have a big hand in rewriting the last love scene. Well, should we say in shredding it? Rob said to me on the night before, look, Ben, I'm trying to look after you here. You've written too many fucking words. Let the fucking actors, give me some space, man. Let me fucking do it with my eyes. You know, I can't do the accent, but that's exactly what he said. And Rob and Rebecca and I sat in it, and it was hard, you know. I mean, I'd nearly hit him with my 3 BAFTAs, you know. Because, you know, and a couple of Olivia's up his up. But anyway, you know, him and Bex are half my age. I've got quite a considerable, but they, as great actors, they were saying, we think the scene's overwritten. You know, this is very long speeches. They're sort of over-declaring their love, and it's the writers all over this scene you need to show the characters, and it
I
was
find
great.
it hard to believe that you would use too many words. Ben.
Exactly.
I can't imagine.
But it was great advice, and I remember ringing Sophie afterwards and saying, you know what, I've had a tough 2 hours because my leading couple have basically confronted me on the scene, and they said they don't think it's good enough, and we need to. And what it really was all about, really, was cutting it down. Although it did result in me being more succinct, coming up with the harmony metaphor, which originally was like a
great.
2-page speech about harmony and assonance and how actually the most obvious things are never the most perfect things. And, you know, one line, you know, we're not a great fit, well, the best harmonies never are. And it's my bloody line, but they pushed me towards basically boiling it down to the truth. And that's a great relationship, and one I'll never forget those uncomfortable 2 hours and how beautiful it was that you took the trouble to take me on.
And then,
I listen at this stage too. He's been talking about the actors, but we should maybe talk about the director, who behind his back I refer to as the Energizer Bunny, because you too, because he's got such energy. He's got energy for the actors, energy for the crews, energy for the extras. I mean, he's just, and you'll talk about a line that's not quite working for you, and you'll get home, and after wrapping, he's written you another paragraph and it's just, his energy is amazing. I think he must take something for it.
Ben, do you write? Do you change the script during the process?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, not always. Some scenes are just great and are really working out. I've just given you one example when it really was quite a major change. Although, as I say, in the long run, it really was more a question of just cutting it down. And Michael's talking about a speech that was written quite near near filming, because he obviously his mea culpa moment. It's very you can't. You can get that wrong, when someone's basically opening up their heart and saying, I've learned something. And Michael and I talked about it at some length. And Michael had some notes. I was a bit drunk when I wrote them, but perhaps you can sort them out. And and I think it was, you said drunk, I'm not sure, maybe it was another term for a different substance. But anyway, again, that was an occasion when the script got rewritten. So yeah, I'm always thinking about it. And every now and then a great gag occurs to you, on the hoof, and something, something comes out. I remember the modulated staccato yelp. Originally, he's talking about this dog noise that has fascinated his character, and the line was, I heard this yelp. And on the day, I said, I'd love you to be more pedantically muso about it. Could you say a modulated staccato yelp? And it was and you were worried. You said too many words, Ben, too many words. But I think I was right on that one. Yeah.
And so now let's get on to also talking about, I'm sure people want to talk about some histories of the the comedy legends we have on the stage here. So, as I said earlier, I grew up with not only your work, Ben, but also your work, Magda. That was a big influence on my life with Big Girls Blouse.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. You've got a lot to answer for. Degen, I grew up just watching these things as a teenager, and we have The Castle. So in comedy, these things are such big things and part of our lives. And now that's why I'm really thankful that things like black comedy exist now, because finally they're getting reflected back, something that, Indigenous communities here can connect with and see themselves. So it's exciting times for me. So, I'd love to talk a bit about, I think, really about the partnerships and how you formed those partnerships with those people, and how, I suppose, working with the team, and sometimes you work together, but let's talk about finding co-partners that you worked with. So Rick Mail.
Well, yes, I've been very fortunate in my few collaborators, Rick Mail, Rowan Atkinson and Queen. I always like to, reach for the top. Now, if you can find a great collaborator, of course, Richard Curtis and I did the Blackadder together. But I'm very interested in you see, the Australian comedy has such a rich pedigree, which is not known overseas. I mean, you work on the thick of it, which is a brilliant piece of work, a great piece of sort of verite television. It's not documentary style, but it's that real sort of excruciating naturalism. But I look back to pre-Office, I look back to Frontline, and I actually think, here in Australia, pre-The Office, pre-the thick of it, you had this wonderful, what Working Dog were doing with that sort of heavy dose of embarrassment comedy, the naffest characters, and I remember thinking at the time, gosh, I wish the world could see it. And in fact, the late great John Clark, a great friend of mine. Again, his work, you know, was mirrored overseas and never credited. I mean, the brilliant double lecture thing. You know, when he plays the same character, when whatever character he's playing is still John Clark each week on the ABC or what. You know, that was done in Britain, and you know, it wasn't. I think John felt very sad about that, you know, and the same goes for the games, you know. So there's so much original stuff here in Australia. I mean, Magda, your generation, was that a university? Were you at college? Were you original?
Yeah, we all came out of Melbourne Uni, and it sort of progressed from there. And then from that, the one comment I want to make is that when Gina and Jane and I did Big Girls Blouse, we thought it would at least put a dint in the glass ceiling. But no one else has followed us. I mean, it's still very much a boys' club comedy in this country. There are some women sort of still coming through, but, you know, we were astounded when we did Big Girls Blouse that it was... Judith Lucy has a great line. If you have more than one woman on stage, it's like you're planning the feminist revolution. And we were just a friendship group who had the same sense of humour, who wanted to do our own stuff. And suddenly when we went round to talk to... you know, radio stations, there was this palpable threat that a lot of the male radio presenters felt, and we were shocked. But it's still quite sad to me, and you know, we met with such resistance, and then, and really when we started out, we had one colleague of mine, female colleague, said to another male colleague, "Do you think women are funny?" And he said, "Not really, no." And that truly was the view, and it still is. You still have Christopher Hitchens saying not that long ago, women aren't funny. The idea that any cultural group are not funny is a nonsense. All it means is that you are not familiar with their culture. We understand as women male culture because we're steeped in it. We understand American humour and British humour because we're steeped in it. If it doesn't translate the other way, it's because those groups don't care to know about that less dominant culture. That's the only thing. It's not an open, equal, fair exchange.
Absolutely. And Ben, you talked about, you were talking yesterday about, which I really loved the discussion of comedy that's sitcom, pure sitcom. You've got a new comedy that is a sitcom, which is absolutely fantastic. I don't think people probably would have seen it out here except illegally. Upstart Crow. It's fantastic. It's on BBC.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm going through a bit of a lovely period. I thought, you know, 5 years ago, I had a really difficult time with a show I tried to do over here. It's taken quite a long time to get accepted as an Australian artist. I've had a lot of kind of, you know, must be shit if you're trying to do it over here kind of attitude. It's kind of weird, sort of that awful old phrase, the cringe, you know. And I love working here. I live here, you know, and I'm part of it now. I'm part of the story. But I'm still very lucky to get work in Britain, and I've got my first hit sitcom this century. I never thought I'd get another one. I had a few in the 20th century.
Can you give me a DVD?
I've promised to send one to Michael. I've only got one, but I'll get some more. I'll get some more from because I've got to give Rebecca one as well.
I'll copy some and you can sell them at the markets.
I've
done a sitcom in the BBC. It's a little bit addery, but it's different, very different. It's about Shakespeare, and it's called Upstart Crow. And the reason it's called Upstart Crow is it's a quote. That's a quote from the only contemporary review that we have written in Shakespeare's time about Shakespeare, and it was a slagging, which just tells you everything you need to know about critics, because it literally, you know, called him an upstart, a false feathers, stealing, etc., and it was riven with jealousy. So this is a piece called Upstart Crow about Shakespeare and his world, but as a sitcom, and it's a studio sitcom, so it's done with laughter, etc. It's the big style comedy. But again, as I said with Austin Powers, you have to, if you're going to play at that scale, you've got to play with absolute honesty. And those of you may know the English comic actor David Mitchell. You might know him from a lot of chat show and game show stuff he does, but very, very fine performance. I hope eventually it'll be taken over here. But I've every sympathy with the ABC. The attitude was, we hardly have any money left, and what we have to use for our local content. And I totally get that. I absolutely, you know, they're right. But if, you know, hopefully at some point Upstart Crow will come over here. Did you, I don't know, Mike, have you done a sitcom, Michael? Have you ever done a...
Never.
You'd be bloody...
Oh, God, you'd be so good.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's one we need to get together. This would be a great company. I mean, Kelton, what do you think of black... I mean, I love black comedy very much. There is perhaps that... I mean, I felt hopeful about that. That was a definite step forward, surely, wasn't it?
I really hoped that black comedy would give every state in Australia the opportunity to do their own black comedy.
Yeah.
Sydney is Sydney. It's black comedy, Sydney black comedy. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that all black fellas are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have so many funny stories, real stories. You know, when we did the circuit, a lot of the actual court cases that we did in the show were real. So, you know, real things like someone getting flogged with a frozen fish. And where's the evidence?
Funny and sad.
No evidence, they ate the evidence. but there's so much of that we can... And hopefully we get the opportunity to...
Do you write?
To branch out.
Do you write?
I devise. I get writer's cramp.
That old actor's trick. Yes, it's all my ideas. Somebody writes it, but it's kind of me, really.
That's it, but that is a very interesting point because it is, I mean, that's a criticism. The same thing happened in the UK where things are very London-centric. They tried to move it up to Manchester, but still everything's being made in London or just outside of the zone. And that's the same thing here. It's Melbourne-centric. It's Sydney-centric.
And unfortunately, we usually don't get a look in because we live on the other side of the world in Western Australia.
Yeah.
Well, I do.
It's bloody hard to get a film up in Western Australia. We're very proud
Well, just
of getting
move.
this one. Yeah? Well, that's what
Oh, you're so stubborn.
It's harder in Australia. I mean, Manchester, the BBC quite rightly has tried to decentralise a bit, take some work to other parts of the country, and there's been this huge move to Salford. And it is only, people are claiming, but it is 2.5 hours on the train, whereas obviously for WA it's 5 hours on a plane. It's a bloody big country. We could do with it being smaller, but that's, maybe with global warming, that's going to happen. We're all sort of retreating, we'll all end up working at Uluru, we could, on
But
top
it is
of it.
still a false, the thing about there, it is still a false thing that's going on. And I've worked on this where, I mean, I was very much outside the M25. I was
That's
shipped
the
in from
motorway
Australia.
around London,
it's a motorway around London. But basically, they have regional funding, and it's the same thing, that goes on everywhere. But people are just driving a ride outside.
Well, they
of
are, but
M25.
I think it's all right. Sorry, do you want to...
Yeah.
But it's sort of, look, it's happened with the ABC where their budgets have been cut and cut and cut, so they've closed up production facilities in South Australia, and then because all of our television channels are so Sydney-centric, Melbourne-centric, that all production happens here and very little happens anywhere else. And it's a whole budgetary thing too.
You're absolutely right, because
It's
hard
logistics,
to
So a lot
ship
of it's
everyone out
logistics.
there and put them up in hotels is very
But,
difficult.
now you look at films that are being made with iPhones, like Tangerine and things like that, those possibilities have opened up a lot, that you can do very low-tech stuff and do it anywhere and get access to the internet. So hopefully that will open up the range of voices that are heard and seen.
Very true, very true. I think if there's anything else you want to bring up, but otherwise we'll take it to some questions to the floor, if that's...
Writing is the old thing, it's a dreadful cliche, but one of the reasons things become cliches is because they often are true, and the 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration is a very important one for anybody who wants to write to know, because you really got to sit down and keep at it and keep working. The only way for me to write is to see it as a process of improvisation. You can't sit down fully formed. You've got to you've got to get on a roll. Got to face the blank page, have, half a baked idea, Fairbridge, what have I got, what are the characters, and start to write. And the first page won't be any good, the second page. But if you can just get on a roll and things start to move, then you can go back and fix it up. I mean, a lot of people get stuck writing a novel because they're constantly trying to write the great first line or the great first page or the great first chapter. You've got to get through that, get through it, write 50 pages so that you've written too much that you can't just junk it, and then go back and fix it up later. So for me, writing, like conversation, is a process of improvisation. I always misquote Ian Forster, but there's a beautiful line. He said, "How can I tell you what I think until I've heard what I have to say?" And certainly my ideas come to me through communicating them. You never really know what's coming next. Another beautiful line of Woody Allen, "When I write a joke, I'm hearing it for the first time." It's absolutely the case. And the same goes for an actor's moment of inspiration. When they find that timing, they don't know where it comes from. It's a moment of improvisation. So to me, you just got to go through the hard moments and get on the roll.
What was the original impetus for this particular story?
Well, the festival. I mean, on this occasion, well, partly it was a practical one. I really wanted to work at home. I really wanted to work in my home state. I live in Fremantle. Most of my work's in the UK. Occasionally, I, get a tiny little nibble at the States, but never really got anywhere there. And then, or else it's over east. So, firstly, I wanted to write a West Australian story and bring some work to the state. But then there was this beautiful little festival full of stories. So that on this occasion, it came because I'm sat there with Emma Thompson going, this would be a great place to write that home gig. And if I can just find a brilliant, hard-working, inspirational producers who'll spend 2 years clawing and taking every phone call, and it's another disappointment, Ben, but we'll keep at it, Michael and Sue, we might get it funded. Yeah. And the great news was West Australia got behind it. And the local community in Binjara, the Noongar community in Binjara, and government money, which of course was crucial to us. And they thought, wow, somebody wants to, Screen West embraced us eventually and have been absolutely incredible. So it's part practical. But yeah, what a better place to tell a story than a funky little folk festival.
Did you write, just a quick question, did you write the film and did you have it fully written, or was it a concept that you sold to get funded?
I started with a synopsis, but fairly detailed. The story of Roland and Cleaves was pretty much there, but the rest was, and 100 other stories under the West Australian sky sort of thing. And Michael took that around, and we started to get some interest from, they offered some seed money. I mean, I wasn't looking for, I didn't need to be paid to do that, but, they say, well, we'll develop a script. There's, $2,000 here or whatever to see a script. So then we moved to a script. So it started with a synopsis. And the moment Screen Oz said, well, we'd be interested in seeing a script, we'll go that far, which is a lot of people, that's the process. So and then I wrote a script about 2.5 years ago. Budget, we're being asked about budget. Our film looks like a $15 million movie at least. And it cost 3.5, and I'm really proud of that. But actually, the most people who should be proud is everybody else who worked for very, very little.
$3 million of that went to me for my renovations.
Yes. It was a community effort, a lot of local funding. Getting a movie over the line is almost impossible. And you'd think, maybe people say, Ben Elton, a bit of a pedigree there. And what a cast. Surely it must have been very easy to get no. Australia, getting behind public arts, public funding. We were so lucky to be the ones who got chosen. A few films get that public money, and on this again, we've been knocked back. Michael and I tried to develop a film before, and we were knocked back. And rightly so. Everybody wants to make their film, and there's only so much Australian public money to help Australian arts, and we got lucky. But yeah, 3.5 million. But God, we made it work. And all the white crowd shots are either real at the festival or else supporting artists who worked for nothing, who turned up to be part of the film, and we had 100 people who were, I remember you tapping them and putting them all in their little bits of costume and things, and they brought bits of costume. A community effort, and I'm afraid that's what art takes these days.
All of these skimpy budgets make it so hard, though, because it means that human beings have to pick up the slack, and you have less rehearsal, you have less shooting time, it's more rushed. And so actors, we're sort of like constantly rushing or, learning, doing all our work beforehand unpaid or, so we're sort of like it's all the crew and everyone working all those hours that have to then go from film to film to film and constantly picking up that slack. And people get worn down, and that's why you get the loss of skills. Like we had this when we did, what was the show we did?
Me?
No, you and me.
Open
Slather. That a lot of the skills that were gained in the early years of sketch comedy in Australia have been lost.
Yeah.
Editing and stuff like that. Like, drama, narrative comedy and drama and sketch comedy, they're very different beasts. So, each time we keep slashing these budgets and thinking that we can just, pull it out of our asses and it's there again.
And
sometimes
they say
when skills
you did
are lost,
it for that. That's the thing. You
once
become
you've done
your own.
You created a monster.
Yeah,
now.
you become your own project. You did that.
Absolutely.
That film was 3.5 million. It looked like 15. Oh well, in that case, but.
We'll give you 2.5 next time.
I have every sympathy for the funding bodies because obviously they too are being slashed, and the ABC above all has not got the money anymore, and we have to stop this. We have to call out this mendacious political assault on the ABC, whereby this absolute canard that somehow it's run by leftists, as if the BBC suffers the same way. It's obviously a Murdoch world conspiracy to destroy public funded arts in order to force everybody to buy their art. And we witness SBS, who purchased for nothing because nobody wanted it, The Handmaid's Tale. Now it's a hit. The Murdoch press are crying foul, saying, why is the public funding something that's a hit? This should be in the commercial environment. Well, actually, it never would have been in the commercial environment without a public funded body putting it there.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have to get behind the ABC and SBS, and or else there will be no Aussie culture. We are seeing it go.
It'll be totally dominated as 70% of the newspapers in Australia. It'll be open slather for television channels, and it's a bad road we're heading down.
And they're doing it to books as well by changing copyright laws and also the way that...
what's that about?
Oh my God, they wanted to change copyright. You need to think about this.
No, I know
to
about it,
15 years from the date of publication. So in 15 years, you wouldn't even own this script and someone could go and do whatever they wanted with it. And we really had to push back on it. So there's this constant sort of economic rationalisation, or economic irrational, I would say, rather than economic rationalism, that they're constantly saying you have to... They referred to books in the document written by the Productivity Commission as cultural externalities. It's so brave new world.
Everybody's got a cultural externality in them. Anyway. And it tends to be biographical.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The awful thing about acting is you just can't go and act. Someone has to ask you. And I haven't been being asked to do comedy a lot, but I think that probably the best thing to do would be to get online and start blogging and start posting stuff on YouTube and seeing what works and what doesn't work. There's not the facilities these days. I mean, I just started out in amateur theatre. I didn't go to acting school, but I was always the goat at school. So I honed my instrument that way, but that sort of doesn't really exist much anymore. It's a very hard road to go to get into because there's such competition as well.
But as you say, with if you're doing your own work and putting it on YouTube and that, a lot of people are being found that way. It's hard. It's a sea of stuff, but...
Gina and Jane and I had to write our way into a career because particularly as women, we would normally get clipboard holder roles where you do the setup line for the guy to do the gag. And we had to learn how to write or I would have had no career. And I didn't think I was a writer when I started out. I thought I was just an actor. But necessity is the mother of invention. And I was really apprehensive and I just bloody well had to force myself to write, to create roles for myself. Just start doing something, because the act of doing something generates energy and it generates momentum. And there's a great line by Goethe, at the moment of commitment, the universe will conspire to assist you. Just do something and then you'll be amazed at what that will manifest in your life. And what you'll start writing at first will be crap, I guarantee you, but just keep going, because even if you don't end up performing that, it will create an energy that will draw people to you so that you're not so much waiting to be asked, but you're actually being proactive.
I would say if there's Amdram to get involved in, Amdram was my life, amateur drama, and my Artful Dodger is still fondly remembered in Godalming in Surrey from 1974. The Surrey Advertiser were kind enough to say I showed promise. Last good review I ever got. I would suggest Amdram. I loved it. It was a big part of my life. Do it. If you want to if you're thinking of comedy, a little bit of stand-up. No one's going to pay you, but, I'm sure if there's a pub with a microphone and say, can I do, 5 minutes unpaid at the top? It is a question of being proactive, certainly getting that call. Occasionally people get breaks. On 3 summers, three young people got their first break. That can happen. That was a wonderful thing. They auditioned and they got a great gig. But meantime, I'd say do Amdram, do the school plays. I did, I was the chief player in Hamlet. It's a very long play for a school play. People shouldn't do Hamlet with 12-year-olds, believe me. I would say...
And no one should ever do King Lear.
Get involved.
Any other questions?
And listen, another thing too is that as I was growing up, there wasn't any television or anything, but I had my heroes You know, I loved Buster Keaton. I loved Jerry Lewis. And I studied them. When I started to work professionally, I'd stand in the wings and watch people like Johnny Lockwood, who was an old vaudeville performer, who had so much you could learn off him. So there is a lot of things you can do by just observing and soaking it in, and be a thief. You know, steal stuff until you've got something that is you.
Yeah.
That becomes part of you.
I started working when I was 17 in theatre and I never had any training before that. And I managed to work with so many senior actors, Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, and they were the ones who taught me. So I acted like a sponge, really. And you really, if you want to be an artist, an actor, a comedian, just persevere with it, mate, and love your work. Love your work and love the people you're working with and all your productions. Yeah.
And get your mates.
Yeah.
You know, do stuff with your mates, read plays, do workshops. Just the act of doing something always generates momentum.
It's an instinct, and it's Woody Allen's point again. When you write a joke, you're hearing it for the first time. You can't design a good piece of work. Like when kids do essays, they're always asked to do an essay plan. And that might work, I think, for something that's got to present an argument and got to come to a conclusion. But I don't think you could do a plan for a joke or a moment. I think it can only be a spontaneous invention. Afterwards, of course, you have to return to it and discipline it and find a way to put it into words. But the initial moment it is a spontaneous combustion. And I think the same goes for when actors produce a marvellous moment of timing. I've so often seen actors in that agony when something wonderful has happened on stage and they know exactly how it works, and then trying to recreate that moment. Oh my God, that was so funny, that cough I was doing, I got such a great laugh, and it's just gone, I can't find it. And at that point, the advice I always give as a director is you have to literally throw it away. You have to stop seeking that laugh. You might rediscover it that way, but you'll never rebuild it with effort. It's a constant frustration for actors in runs, different for film acting, of course. But when you're in a run, when we had the run of We Will Rock You, ran 12 years in the West End, and some of those actors were there for quite a long time. And oh my goodness, the number of times they had to rebuild from the base up to find the natural comedy, because the moment you're doing it by rote, the comedy is gone. Why doesn't that pause work anymore? Because you know it's going to be funny before you're doing it, and the audience smell deceit. Audiences understand when they're in the presence of a lie. And an actor trying to be funny, no matter how much they disguise that fact, they're not deliberately trying to be funny, they're just trying to refine that funny that somehow was gone. Stop trying to refine it. Got to start again, do it differently. And I always say, I don't want to hear a laugh tonight. I hope you don't get a single laugh. I want you to stop. It's not a funny role anymore, because that's the only way you'll refine the funny, is to forget the thing you had and is now eluding you. But geez, most actors don't get a chance to do a long run anymore. We should have the chance to lose our improvisation.
Do you know, I did a Guys and Dolls with Don My Warehouse,
Beautiful.
and there was a really interesting thing that the director said, that often when things work and then don't work is because someone else on stage is doing something different. Because in film, you'll find that often you can replicate it or it can work. But what happens on stage is that if someone else you've got no focus,
chemistry.
and if someone else pulls that focus away, it all just goes out of control.
Darling, you are ruining my gag.
And
Can
it's
you not?
true. People do.
Can you not sip the water the way you're sipping the water? Because it's
I used to hate it when people would come up to me after a show. I just love that line of yours. And the next night, it's gone. It's bloody gone.
The moment you're aware you're in the presence.
The moment you become self-conscious, here comes that funny moment again. Gone.
So it's all instinct. If the actor is aware they're in the presence of a gag, it's not going to be funny.
And Ben, I was going to just put into the point of that it's a lot of observation. You must observe these things, just log in your brain a lot of moments that you then put into a film, I imagine, that you saw someone do something that made you laugh, so you've
When I was first a
catalogued
stand-up
it.
comic back in 1981, and I became a stand-up comic just as a way of getting my wares around, so that's an answer to the young actor over there. I was a writer, but nobody was buying my stuff, so I became my own, and I tried to show my wares. And it was all observational comedy, talking about, people, in it funny how, have you noticed how? And I started carrying a notebook around, and from that moment on, I didn't have a single idea. The moment you're looking for it, you're thinking, you can't be a journalist on your own life. If you're an artist, be a journalist, that's an honourable thing to be, but if you're an artist, I don't think you can see yourself as a constant fodder. What am I? Oh, that's funny. You lose your friends. Oh, hang on, let me write that down. This is so funny. Nobody ever wants to talk to you anymore because you're always going, oh, can I just write? That's so funny. Yeah. So I stopped carrying a notebook around. All you can hope is that when you sit down to write, something of what you have felt and been will re-emerge. Something of your understanding will re-emerge. But if you spend your time trying to think about it, for me anyway, that's what you have to see all art as an improvisation. When somebody approaches the canvas, they may want to paint the vase, but they have no idea what it's going to look like until they put the paint on the canvas. And that's the same for me with every page I write. You don't know what it's going to look like until it's become real. And that process is magical.
With comedy, can I ask a question? With comedy, so much is about tone, because it's so easy to get that wrong.
Always.
When did you feel like you knew what the tone was going to be for this one, performance-wise? What level, how big or little, or?
But really, a great deal of it comes down to the actors. Sometimes, for instance, Kate as the security guard, the humorless kind of, officious, but sort of, she's got a kind heart, but it's cloaked in a massive amount of sort of self-awareness. She plays this, we've all seen, I think the word is often door bitch, and that's probably a bad word to use, but you can use it about a man as well. But anyway. Now, I probably would have played it bigger, and a lot of the auditions that I got were definitely seeing it as a comic role, and Kate played it with absolute naturalism. She took it right down, and it was in the eyes. The comedy was in the eyes. And of course, that's it. It's not a comic role at all. It's a real role, as all good comic roles are. So I think it's when you start to work with the actors that you find the level. I trust my taste, and I can say to an actor, it's too big, too small. But often an actor will do it bigger than you expected or smaller than you expected, and that's when, with Miranda, for instance, classic, that's one of the biggest performances I've ever been involved with. It's almost pantomimic in its scale, and yet it's wonderfully, honestly insane. And I don't think either Richard or I thought the tone of that performance was going to be at anything like that scale. We thought it would be drier, it would be reflecting Rowan's level. Another one is, where I knew was with Rick. If anyone knows the Blackadder, Rick Mayall, the late great Rick Mayall, my dear friend, played Flashheart, this immense force of nature, a scale beyond anything else in the Blackadder, even beyond Stephen Fry's Melchett, Blackadder! And Rick came in like a hurricane. Of course, I knew that was going to happen because Rick and I were like brothers and touring together on the road all the time. And I kind of led on the writing of that because I knew. So there was one where I had the tone in my mind and Rick did not disappoint. But with Miranda, I didn't know. So sometimes you know, sometimes you don't. But John Lloyd often says, Rick came in and blew Rowan away. He didn't at all. Rowan's performance opposite Rick was perfect. He understood his job was to simply raise a very small eyebrow. All you needed was Rick to go, I've got a plan, it's as hot as my pants. And then you see Rowan and the eyes are dead, but the reaction is absolutely perfect. The two of them together, two scales of comedy meeting in perfect harmony. And that's all about the actors. The writer can only hope.
It's not like an architect doing a blueprint for a building. There is that thing of actors do bring a whole life and their own physicality and everything to it too, and you have to be open to that.
Of course, and as I say, when Miranda did it, sometimes you know what's coming and you're looking for it, and sometimes you don't. I mean, Queenie's charm in your creation of Queenie that we could ever...
Oh, my Queenie, I thought you meant Miranda's
Queenie. Oh, that's
Queenie.
another Queenie.
You and the
You're
Queens.
Right. I've got to
Queen,
stop
Queenie,
writing characters called Queenie.
And then you work with Queen.
That's right, there is Queen as well,
Have you met the Queen?
I've met the Queen, I have indeed. I was
He
in
loves
a Christmas broadcast. I can drop some bloody
queen?
names. Well, I'm quite camp, but I'm
You are a musical theatre lover.
I
love
a bit of musical theatre. I can't deny it. And we got fashionable. When I first did We Will Rock You, oh God, it was the real John Lennon reaction. It's all granny music, and it's people bursting in the song. And suddenly it's cool. The great Tim Minchin's writing musicals. You too are writing a musical, and I'll tell you why it's cool. It's because the only way to monetize art anymore is live.
Because if you actually make a record, you can't make... So suddenly, in the old days, you know, a band would tour to support an album. Now they make an album in the hope that it'll get enough people to come and see them on tour, because it's the only way they can monetize. And certainly, you know, a lot of big artists are going back into musical theatre because at least they can charge for a ticket, whereas they put it on the net, they can't. But it's great, because I love musical theatre.
Should you do a musical theatre of this?
Well, you know, 3 Summers the musical. I mean, with something like Mormon running in town, you know, and then recently we had the original production of My Fair Lady. You see the breadth. There is no one musical theatre. The idea, you know, John Lennon was wrong. It is no granny music. You know, it can be, you know, Paul McCartney was right. He loved musical theatre and didn't worry that it was uncool. And the funny thing is, it's actually become cool with people like Tim, who has just done that brilliant. Oh, what a gag. Why didn't it occur to anyone else? I still call Australia homophobic. What a fantastic gag. Yeah, anyway.
All right.
We need a drink.
That is time for us. Thank you very much to our panellists for coming along. Thank you very much. Rebecca and Robert on there. Thank you.